video ha. Okay, just listen to the lecture. Okay, can you see my screen now?
Yes, Dr.
Sila. Okay, walang nakaharang sa screen. Wala naman.
Meron po yung
Alin yung nakaharang sa screen? Sorry. Kita niyo na?
Doc, yung nakaharang po yung parang ano po ba ito? Yung sa Zoom po yung participant.
Talaga? Ano kaya ilahay? Doc, swipe niyo yung face. Sorry, paano ko isa-set? Sorry, medyo swipe. Saan ko? Swipe. Yeah, okay na.
Yes, Doc, wala na po ako.
Okay, sorry. Pagpasensyahan. Sige. Okay na, wala na nakaharang na. So, let's start. So, medyo mahaba-haba itong topic na to. So, we'll be discussing basic virology. So, what is virology? So, this is the study of the viruses, okay? Complexes of nucleic acids and the proteins that have the capacity for replication in animal, plant, and bacterial cells. So, the viruses, okay, to replicate themselves, the viruses use up the functions of the host cells on which they are parasites. Okay, so in this lecture, we will be discussing the properties of the viruses, okay, the identification and the laboratory diagnosis of the viruses, as well as the pathogenesis of viral disease. So, for the first part of your lecture, okay, we'll be having the general characteristics of the viruses. So after reading this lesson, you will be able to explain the concept of the viruses in relation to other microorganisms, describe the morphological features of the viruses, explain the multiplication process or the replication process of the viruses, describe the methods of cultivation, okay, and the classification and naming of the viruses or the nomenclature of the viruses. Okay, so what is a virus? So the word virus is derived from the Latin word for poison. Okay, they occupy the twilight zone that separates the living from the non-living. So they do not have a cellular organization. So viruses are the smallest infectious agent. Okay, it ranges about 20 to 300 nanometers in diameter and contain only one kind of nucleic acid. So it's either RNA or DNA as their genome. So hindi pwedeng both. Okay? So the medical importance of the viruses lies in their ability to cause a very large number of human diseases. Okay, so viruses are obligate intracellular parasites. Okay, they lack the enzymes necessary for protein and nucleic acid synthesis. They are dependent for the replication on the synthetic machinery of the host cells. Okay, they multiply by a complex process and not by binary fission. They are unaffected by antibacterial antibiotics. Okay? And viruses, as I've said earlier, can cause wide range of human diseases. So they cause infections like common cold, chicken pox, measles, encephalitis, rabies, AIDS, and what we have now, the COVID-19. Okay? So the differences between the viruses and bacteria are shown in this table. So as compared, or viruses as compared to bacteria do not have a cellular organization. So sabi ko kanina, okay, they multiply by complex process. They contain only one type of nucleic acid, so either DNA or RNA, and they are unaffected by antibacterial antibiotics. Okay, so let's move on to the morphology of the viruses. So the extracellular infectious virus particle is called the virion. So viruses are much smaller than bacteria. So they are too small to be seen under light microscope. Some large viruses, like pox viruses, can be seen under the light microscope when they are stained properly. So I've said earlier, the viruses range in size from 20 nanometers, okay, to 300 nanometers. So pox viruses are one of the largest viruses, while parvoviruses are one of the smallest viruses. So the earliest method of estimating the size of a virus particle was by passing them through membrane filters. So it has graded porosity. So the average pore diameter of the finest filter that permitted the virion, okay, gave an estimate of its size. Okay pa yung sound ko?
Yes po, Doc.
Okay. So with the development of ultracentrifuge, okay, a second method became available. So that's sedimentation and ultracentrifuge. From the rate of the sedimentation of the viruses in the ultracentrifuge, the particle size could be calculated using the Stokes law. So, but the Stokes law will not be discussing that. Nice to know na lang. So the third and most direct method of measuring the size of the virus or measuring the virus size is the electron microscopy. So by this method, both the shape and size of the virus can be studied. Oops. Saan ba ako? I'm sorry. Ha? Ito pala ako kanina. Yeah. So, sorry. So, viruses comes in many shapes and size. Okay? The structural information is necessary for virus classification and for establishing a structure-function relationship of virus protein. So, the virion, okay, consists essentially of a nucleic acid surrounded by a protein coat. So, the capsid. So, that's the capsid. Okay? So, the capsid naman with the enclosed nucleic acid is called the nucleocapsid. And the capsid protects the nucleic acid from harmful agents that are present in the environment. So this is composed of a large number of capsomers which form its morphological units. And the chemical units of the capsid are polypeptide molecules which are arranged symmetrically. So they form a shell around the nucleic acid. Okay? Okay, so virions may be enveloped or non-enveloped or what you call the naked viruses. Okay, so viruses that are formed from only a nucleic acid and capsid, so nucleic acid and capsid are called the naked viruses or non-enveloped viruses. Those viruses naman that are formed with a nucleic acid capsid surrounded by a lipid layer are called enveloped viruses. So the viral envelope may either be intracellular or cytoplasmic in origin. Then extending outward and away from the capsid on some naked viruses, and envelope viruses are the protein structures called the spikes. So, kita niyo sa picture yung spikes. Okay? At the tips of those spikes, there are structures that allow the virus to attach and enter the cell. So, like for example, the influenza virus, so meron siyang hemagglutinin spikes or H spikes or enzymes like the neuraminidase or meron rin siyang neuraminidase and influenza spikes. Okay, this allows the influenza virus to detach from the cell surface during release of new virions. Okay, so the influenza virus is identified by their H and N spikes. Okay, so for example, the H1N1 influenza virus were responsible for the pandemics in 1918 and 2009. Then H2N2 for the pandemic in 1957, and H3N2 for pandemic in 1968. Okay, so please study this. Okay, naked viruses are defined as tiny viruses that do not have a lipid envelope, unlike the viruses or envelope viruses that have an additional layer around the protein capsid. Thus, naked viruses have only the protein coat surrounding their genetic material. Oh, sorry. Okay, so let's move on. So the virus architecture can be grouped into 3 types based on the arrangement of morphological subunits. So we have the cubic symmetry, okay, the helical symmetry, examples, the orthomyxoviruses, complex structures like poxviruses. In cubic symmetry, example of that is the adenoviruses. So an icosahedron or icosahedral pattern or cubic symmetry, okay, it is a polygon with 12 vertices and 20 facets or sides. So each facet is in the shape of an equilateral triangle. In the nucleocapsids naman with helical symmetry, the capsomers and nucleic acid are wound together to form a helical or a spiral tube. So, for example, the tobacco mosaic virus. Some viruses naman or some virus particle do not exhibit the simple cubic symmetry or the helical symmetry, but they are more complicated in structure. So, for example, the pox viruses are brick-shaped, okay, with ridges on the external surface and a core and lateral bulbs inside. So, the overall shape of the virus is quite variable, but mostly they are spherical. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of your lecture. It's all about the classification of the viruses. So till about 1950, little was known of the basic properties of the viruses. So they were named haphazardly. Okay, their names were based on the diseases they caused or on the place of their isolation. So they were grouped according to the affinity to different systems or organs of the body, or what we call the tropism. Okay, so human viruses were classified as dermotropic. Okay, that is those producing lesions or skin lesions, like for example, smallpox, chickenpox cells. Okay, neurotropic naman, that is those affecting the neurons, nervous system, like the poliomyelitis and the rabies. Pneumotropic naman, that is those affecting the respiratory tract, like the influenza and the common cold. Excuse me. And viscerotropic naman, that is those affecting the visceral organs like hepatitis. Okay? So Boden in 1941 made the pioneering suggestion that the viral nomenclature and the classification should be based on the properties of the viruses and not upon the host responses. Okay, so from the early 1950s, the viruses began to be classified into groups based on their physiochemical and structural features. So the nomenclature and the classification are now the official responsibility of the ICTV, or the International Committee on Taxonomy of Viruses. So yan. So the classification of viruses is based on the collection and comparison of various characters that describe the virus and can then be used to distinguish one virus from another. So the characters can consist of any property or feature of the virus and include the molecular composition of the genome, okay, the structure of the virus capsid, and whether or not it is enveloped or naked siya. Okay, the gene expression program used to produce virus proteins, the host range, the pathogenicity, and the split similarity. So as emphasized by the ICPD, viruses are classified into two main divisions. So based on the type of the nucleic acid they possess, okay, so the riboviruses contain RNA and the deoxyriboviruses contains DNA. Okay, so further classification is based on the other properties of the viruses, like, for example, the strandedness of the nucleic acid, the symmetry of the nucleic acid, the presence of envelope, the size and shape of the virion, and the number of capsids present. Okay. So within the ICPD literature, so this is in your book, order are given the suffix virilis. Okay, families use viridae, and subfamilies use virinae, and generally use virus. Okay, virus species names are italicized. Okay, so in some instances, widely used common names differ from their formal designation. So, for example, the polioviruses are formally assigned to the species human enterovirus C. Okay? So, virus orders may be used to group virus families that share their common characteristics. So, for example, in order Mononega virilis, this encompasses the Bornaviridae, Filoviridae, Paramyxoviridae, and Rhabdoviridae families. Okay, a system has been established in which viruses are separated into two major groupings called families. Okay, on the basis on virion morphology, genome structure, and strategies of replication. So virus family names have the suffix viridae. In several families like Herpesviridae, Paramyxo, and Parvoviridae, okay, or Pox and Rheoviridae and Retroviridae. So a larger grouping called subfamilies has been defined. Okay, this reflects the complexity of relationship among members of the viruses. So the subfamily names have the suffix virinae. Then within each family naman, okay, subdivisions called genera are usually based on the biological, genomic, and physicochemical, or serologic differences. Okay? Criteria used to define the genera vary from family to family. Okay, so the genus names carry the suffix virus. Okay, let's discuss few medically important families of DNA viruses. So these are Herpesviridae, Adenoviridae, Hepadnaviridae, Parvoviridae, Papillomaviridae, and Poxviridae. So please remember the mnemonic, or you can do your own. You can make your own mnemonics to memorize the medically important DNA viruses. So like Hehepox and Apoquar. I took this slide from Nagkagudats lecture. Okay, so Adenoviridae family consists of naked, double-stranded DNA virus having an icosahedral capsid. Herpesviridae consists of enveloped, double-stranded DNA viruses having an icosahedral capsid. So examples of this family are herpes simplex virus and varicella zoster virus. Okay, Poxviridae consists of enveloped double-stranded DNA having complex shaped capsid. Papoviridae, naked DNA virus with icosahedral capsid. Parvoviridae naman consists of a non-enveloped single-stranded DNA viruses. So this, for example, is the parvovirus B19, and the Hepadnaviridae family includes hepatitis B virus, which is partially double-stranded DNA virus. So please remember these general statements that most DNA viruses have double-stranded DNA except parvovirus. Okay? Most are icosahedral except poxvirus. Okay? Complex. Envelope viruses, you have hehepox, okay? Or herpes viridae, hepadnaviridae, and pox viridae. Naked viruses, apapar. So that's adenovirus, adenoviridae, papovaviridae, and parvoviridae. Sorry. They all multiply in the nucleus except the pox virus. Okay, it replicates in the cytoplasm. Okay, please memorize that. Okay, so positive strand RNA viruses. Okay, these are a group of related viruses that have a positive sense single-stranded genomes made of a ribonucleic acid. The positive sense genome, can act as messenger RNA and can be directly translated into viral proteins by host cell ribosome. Okay, so positive strand RNA viruses encode an RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which is used during replication of the genome to synthesize a negative sense antigenome that is then used as a template to create a new positive sense viral genome. Okay, so some medically important families of RNA viruses are, so we have Picornaviridae, Orthomyxo, Paramyxo, Flavi, Rhabdoviridae, and Retroviridae. So, members of the family of Picornaviridae are small, so mga around 20 to 30 nanometers. They are non-enveloped icosahedral viruses with a single-stranded RNA genome. So, examples of this includes the poliovirus and the Coxsackie virus. Flaviviridae consists of enveloped single-stranded RNA viruses. So examples of the Flaviviridae includes the yellow fever virus, Japanese encephalitis virus, dengue virus. The members of Retroviridae family are enveloped RNA viruses, which have a special enzymes called reverse transcriptase. Okay? This enzyme is an RNA-dependent DNA polymerase. Okay, this is required in the synthesis of DNA from RNA. So an example of the Retroviridae family is the HIV virus or the human immunodeficiency virus, which causes AIDS. Okay, please memorize. Okay. Negative sense RNA viruses include the following. So all of the negative sense RNA viruses consist of a single-stranded RNA genome. They are also enveloped viruses with helical capsid. Okay, so the viruses include Orthomyxoviridae, are enveloped viruses carrying hemagglutinin and neuraminidase peplones on the envelope. Again, let's memorize. Okay, so other RNA viruses, okay, we have arenavirus, arenaviridae, and reoviridae. Okay, so please remember this. Okay, so most RNA viruses have a single-stranded genome except reoviridae. Most positive single-stranded RNA viruses have icosahedral symmetry except coronaviridae. Okay, all single-stranded RNA viruses or have helical symmetry. Okay, helical symmetry are always enveloped. So most RNA viruses are enveloped except the following. So Kaliski, Viridae, Picornaviridae, and Reoviridae. So these viruses have icosahedral symmetry. Okay. Next. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to viral replication. Okay, so multiplication of viruses is called the viral replication. So viruses contains the genetic information for the replication, but they lack the enzymes. So they will depend on the host cell machinery for replication. The viral replication process or the cycle can be divided into 6 phases. So we have adsorption or attachment, penetration, uncoating, biosynthesis, maturation and assembly, and release. We'll be discussing this one by one. Okay, so in adsorption, so this is a phase. In this phase, the virus gets attached to the host cell. So adsorption or attachment. So the host cell should have specific receptors that are present on its surface. So these receptors recognize the viral surface components. So this cell-virus interaction helps the virus to attach to the host cell surface. Next, next step is penetration. So in this phase, the virus enters into the host cell. So bacteria have rigid cell walls. So viruses which infect bacteria cannot penetrate into the bacterial cell. Only the nucleic acid of the virus, enters the bacterial cell. So animal and human cells do not have cell wall. So therefore, the whole virus enters the cell. The virus particle may be engulfed by a process called viropexis. Okay, so in case of envelope viruses, the viral envelope may fuse with the cell membrane of the host cells. Then the nucleocapsid is released into the cytoplasm. Next step is uncoating. So in this process, in which this is the process in which the outer layers and capsid of the virus are removed. This mostly occurs by the action of the lysosomal enzymes present in the host cell. Okay, so this can also occur by a viral uncoating enzyme. So finally, the viral nucleic acid is released into the cell. So this is an obligatory step. Next is the synthetic phase. So the biosynthesis in this phase, the viral nucleic acid and capsid are synthesized. So the biosynthesis consists essentially of the following steps. So there is transcription of messenger RNA from the viral nucleic acid. There is also translation of mRNA into early proteins or non-structural proteins. So these are the enzymes that are responsible for the synthesis of viral components. In third step, there is replication of viral nucleic acid. Fourth step, synthesis of late proteins or the structural proteins. Okay, they are the components of daughter virion capsid. The next is assembly or maturation and assembly. So this is assembly of the daughter virions following the synthesis of viral nucleic acid and protein. So it can take place in the host cell nucleus, pwede rin sa cytoplasm. Okay, herpes viruses and adenoviruses are assembled in the nucleus. Okay. The next is release. Okay, so viruses which infect bacteria or the bacteriophages are released by lysis of the infected bacterium. Animal viruses are usually released without cell lysis. Okay. Third part of your lecture is pathogenesis of viral diseases. So the fundamental process of viral infection is the viral replicative cycle. So the cellular response to that infection may range from no apparent effect to cytopathology with accompanying cell death to hyperplasia or pwede rin cancer. So important principles that pertain to viral disease include the following. So many viral infections are subclinical. Okay? The same disease syndrome may be produced by a variety of viruses. Third, the same virus may produce a variety of diseases. And fourth, The outcome in any particular case is determined by both the viral and host factors, and this is influenced by the environmental context and genetics of each. Okay. So viral pathogenesis is the process by which viruses produce disease in the host. So the factors that determine the viral transmission, multiplication, dissemination, and development of disease in the host involves complex and dynamic interactions between the virus and the susceptible host. So viruses cause disease when they breach the host's primary physical and natural protective barrier, evade local and tissue and immune defenses, spread in the body, and destroy cells either directly or via bystander immune and inflammatory responses. So for your reading assignment, please know the following definition of terms. So, what are the steps in viral pathogenesis? So, viruses need to establish infections in the host cell in order for them to multiply. So, for infection to occur, the virus has to hijack the host factors and evade the host immune response for efficient replication. So, viral replication frequently requires complex interaction between the virus and host factors that may result in deleterious effects in the host, which confers its pathogenicity. So these are the important steps of virus life cycle that shape pathogenesis. So first, entry and primary replication, activation of innate protection, viral spread and cell tropism, cellular injury and clinical illness, recovery from infection or establishment of persistent infection, and virus shedding. Okay, so there are 3 requirements that must be satisfied to ensure successful infection of a host. So firstly, there must be sufficient quantity of virus available to initiate infection, so virus load. Okay? Cells at the site of infection must be accessible in that their cell membranes displays host-encoded receptors that the virus can exploit for entry into the cell, and the host antiviral defense system must be ineffective or absent. Okay? Viruses are transmitted by a horizontal route, the common route of transmission is usually person-to-person contact, or pwedeng vertical transmission from mother to child transmission, or vector transmission. So, na-discuss na natin before to in your bacteriology, diba? Okay, so human viruses cause either systemic or localized infections by entering the host through a variety of routes, including direct inoculation, as well as the respiratory, conjunctival, GIT, genitourinary route. So, in addition, viruses can enter host through a break in the skin, or via the mucosal surfaces of various routes. Okay? O yun nga, sabi ko kanina, pwedeng mother-to-child transmission. So, that's the vertical transmission. Okay? Mother-to-child transmission can occur in utero, or pwede rin during delivery, or through breastfeeding. So, following initial entry to the host, the virus takes over the host cell machinery to undergo viral amplification. So here, the virus must modulate the host's innate immune response to prevent its elimination by the body while facilitating its replication. The replicated virus from the initially infected cell then dispersed to infect neighboring susceptible cells, possibly with spread to different cell types like the leukocytes. So this results in a localized infection in which the virus mainly spreads and infects adjacent cells to the site of entry. Otherwise, the virus can be released into extracellular fluid. So examples of localized infection include common colds, rhinovirus, flu, GIT infections caused by the rotaviruses, or skin infection caused by papillomavirus. Okay, so sabi ko kanina, viral infection can either cause localized or systemic disease. So several viruses that cause systemic disease in the host spread from the site of entry to the target tissue, where they cause cell injury after multiplication. So the virus can cause systemic disease, okay, through a disseminated infection spread throughout the body. So the predominant mode of viral dissemination occurs through the bloodstream or through the lymphatic system, some of which include viruses responsible for chickenpox, here the varicella zoster virus, okay, smallpox, variola, okay, HIV, okay. So, excuse me, wait lang. Ano ba? Ay, wait. Saan ba ako? So, a minority of viruses can disseminate via the nervous system. So, notably, the poliovirus can be transmitted via the fecal-oral route, okay, where this virus initially replicates on the site of the entry, okay, then the small intestine and spread to the regional lymph nodes. Then the virus will disseminate via the bloodstream into different organs of the body, example, liver and the spleen, followed by a secondary round of replication and dissemination into the central nervous system to damage the motor neurons. Okay, so there are few main overarching factors affecting viral diseases. So we have virus tropism, virus factors, and the host factors. Okay, so virus tropism refers to the virus preferential site of replication in discrete cell types within an organ. So in most cases, tropism is determined by the ability of the viral surface protein to fuse or bind to surface receptors of specific target cells to establish infection. Okay, so thus the binding specificity of viral surface proteins dictates tropism as well as the destruction of particular cell population and is therefore a major determinant of virus pathogenesis. Okay? However, co-receptors are sometimes required in addition to the binding of cellular reception on host cells to viral proteins in order to establish infection. Okay, so aside from the cellular receptors, okay, viral tropism can also govern by other intracellular factors such as tissue-specific transcription factors. So example would be the JC, polyomavirus, in which its tropism is limited to the glial cells since its enhancer is only active in glial cells. Okay, and the JC viral gene expression requires host transcription factors expressed exclusively in the glial cells. Okay, so the accessibility of host tissue and organs to the virus also regulates the tropism. So accessibility is affected by the physical barriers such as the enteroviruses, which replicates in the intestine since they are able to withstand the bile digestive enzymes in the acidic environment. Okay, so next factor is, virus factors are largely influenced by viral genetics, okay, which is the virulence determinant of structural or non-structural protein and non-coding sequences. So, for a virus to successfully infect and cause disease in the host, it has to encode specific factors or virus factors in its genome to overcome the preventive effects of physical barriers and modulate host inhibition of viral replication. Okay, so virus, virus factors encoded in the genome often control the tropism, routes of virus entry, the shedding, and the transmission. So, for example, in polioviruses, the attenuating point mutations are thought to induce a replication and translation defect to reduce the virus ability of cross-linking to host cells and replicate within the nervous system. Okay, so viruses have also developed a variety of immunomodulation mechanism to disrupt the host immune response. So these tend to feature the virus-encoded decoy receptors that target cytokines and chemokines produced as part of the host immune response or homologs of host cytokines. So as such, viruses capable of manipulating the host cell receptors or response to infection as an immune evasion strategy exhibit greater pathogenicity. So the ability of a virus to cause disease in unaffected hosts is called pathogenicity. Okay? So viral pathogenesis, okay, is also largely dependent on the host factors. So several viral infections have displayed a variety of effects ranging from asymptomatic or symptomatic or even critical infection. So this is solely based of differing host factors alone. So in particular, genetic factors, age, and immunocompetence, they play a very important role in dictating whether the viral infection can be modulated by the host. Alternatively, immunocompromised individual due to an existing illness, may have defective immune response, which makes them more vulnerable to damage by the virus. So furthermore, a number of viruses display variable pathogenicity depending on the age of the host. So aside from genetics, age is also another host factor. Okay? So mumps, polio, and Epstein-Barr virus cause more severe illnesses in adults or severe diseases in adults, while others like rotavirus cause more severe infection in infants. Okay? So it is therefore hypothesized that the host immune system and defense mechanism might differ with age. So, yeah. Another host factor is the production of hormones. Okay, production of hormones may also influence the outcome of some viral infection. So, for example, polio, hepatitis A, B, and E, and pox viruses are more severe during pregnancy, okay, suggesting that hormones may influence viral pathogenesis. And also, the nutritional state and personal habits of the host can also affect the viral pathogenesis. Okay, so, example, if the patient has protein deficiency, okay, protein deficiency has been shown to be associated with the severity of the measles infection. Most likely, this is due to the weak cellular immunity of the host. Some personal habits, such as smoking, okay, increases the severity of influenza virus infection. In addition, host response, such as fever and inflammation, have been suggested to have an important role in combating viral infections. Okay. So, next is cellular injury and clinical illness. So, how does the virus cause the disease? So, virus can cause damage caused by the virus. So, once inside the host cell, the viruses can destroy cells through a variety of mechanisms. So, viruses can induce spreading direct cytopathic effect, okay, to disrupt the cellular function. Okay, this could be through releasing of enzymes to degrade the host metabolic precursors or releasing proteins that inhibit the synthesis of important factors that are present in the host. Okay, so namely, viral proteins of herpes simplex virus can degrade host DNA and inhibit host DNA replication and mRNA transcription. Or another example, poliovirus can inactivate proteins that are involved in the host mRNA translation without affecting the poliovirus mRNA translation. In some cases, expression of viral fusion proteins on the surface of the host cells can cause host cell fusion to form multinucleated cells. Notable examples include the measles virus, HIV, respiratory syncytial virus. Importantly, viral infections can differ by their lifestyle strategy. So the lifestyle strategies of viruses. So this table shows you, this shows you the lifestyle strategy of the viruses in the host cell. So acute infections tend to occur for a relatively shorter duration, while persistent infections are when the virus is not completely cleared from the body, or this happens when cells continue to survive despite a viral infection. So this can be further classified into latent and chronic. So in a latent infection, the reactivation of disease may occur a long time after the initial infection. So here, the only viral genome is present. There is no replication occurring. In chronic naman, or in persistent chronic infection, there is basal levels of viral replication, but it does not stimulate the immune response. Okay, so damage caused by host immune system. Okay, sometimes instead of cell death or cellular dysfunction caused by the virus, or host immune response can mediate disease or excessive inflammation. So the stimulation of the innate and adaptive immune system in response to viral infection destroys infected cells, which may lead to severe pathological consequences to the host. Okay, the damage caused by the immune system is known as the virus-induced immunopathology. Specifically, immunopathology is caused by the excessive release of antibodies, interferons, and pro-inflammatory cytokines. Okay. There is also activation of the complement system, or the hyperactivity of the cytotoxic T cells. Okay. So secretion of interferon and other cytokines can trigger cell damage and can cause fever and flu-like symptoms. In severe cases naman of certain viral infection, okay, example is the avian influenza or the H5N1. Okay, aberrant induction of the host immune response can elicit a flaring release of cytokines known as the cytokine storm. In some instances, viral infection can initiate an autoimmune response, okay, which occurs via different proposed mechanism. It can be molecular mimicry or a bystander mechanism. Okay, molecular mimicry refers to an overlap of structural similarity between a viral antigen and self-antigen. The bystander mechanism, okay, hypothesizes the initiation of a non-specific and overreactive antiviral response that tackles self-antigens in the process. So damage caused by the host itself due to autoimmunity was seen in West Nile virus. Okay, so the immune response is best and in most cases the only means of controlling the viral infection. So the ultimate goal of the immune response, okay, in a viral infection is to eliminate both the virus and the host cells harboring or replicating the virus. So following a viral infection, okay, the host will succumb, recover, or establish a chronic infection. Then recovery mechanisms include both your innate and your adaptive immune responses. So interferon and other cytokines, humoral and cell-mediated immunity, and possibly other host defense factors are also involved. So the relative importance of each component differs with the virus and the disease. So please read this in your book. Okay. So this is the last stage, and the last stage in pathogenesis is the shedding of infectious virus into the host. Into the environment. So this is a necessary step to maintain a viral infection in population of hosts. Shedding usually occurs from the body surfaces involved in the viral entry. Okay? Shedding occurs at different stages of disease depending on the particular agent that is involved. During the viral shedding, an infected individual is infectious to contact. Okay, the respiratory, alimentary, and urogenital tract and the blood are the most frequent sites of shedding in the form of bodily fluids such as aerosols, the skin, and excrement. So the virus would then go on to be transmitted to another person, establish the infectious cycle all over again. Okay, next part, and this is the fourth part na ba ng lecture niya, okay, is diagnostic virology. So, diagnostic, let's move on to laboratory diagnosis of viral diseases. So, diagnostic virology is concerned with identifying the virus associated with clinical signs and symptoms. Procedures most commonly used include the following. Yeah, so we have detection of detection of meaningful immune response to the virus, like by immunologic assays, okay, identification of the agent by staining, okay, this is by light and electron microscopy, and also do isolation and identification of the agent by means of cell culture or by using fertile eggs, and detection of the viral nucleic acids by amplification techniques. Okay? Yeah. So often it is very difficult to identify a virus, okay, in relation to the disease observed or when conducting a retrospective study of a population to determine the exposure to a virus or when measuring the response of an individual to a vaccine. So in these cases, indirect methods of measure are needed, okay, such as measuring antibody response to the virus of interest. So several methods exist for this purpose. So a few of the most commonly used methods are the following. So yeah, we have virus neutralization, hemagglutinating inhibition assay, enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay, etc. So the principles of these assays are fundamentally the same. Okay, they depend upon the antibody-antigen interaction and consist of a known virus or viral protein. Okay, a patient sample, usually the serum, and an indicator. So if antibodies are present in the patient's serum, they will bind to the virus. But if there is no virus present, if no antibodies present, no binding will occur. So the indicator is observed to determine whether the sample is positive or negative for antibodies. Yeah, so viral neutralization test. So in this test, so the sample of interest is incubated with the target virus and changes in cell culture are observed, or the changes in the cell culture are called the cytopathic effect, or CPE. If the sample contains antibodies, it will prevent the virus from growing in the cell culture. So there will be no cytopathic effect. If no antibodies are present in the sample, okay, the virus will grow and you will observe cytopathic effect. Okay, another test is your hemagglutination inhibition. Okay, so certain viruses have a protein on their surface that interacts with red blood cells and it is able to attach to them. So this property is called hemagglutination, and the surface protein of the virus is the hemagglutinine. Okay, so the inhibition or blocking of this activity is the basis of the hemagglutination inhibition test. So most well-known virus with this property is called the influenza virus. Like the virus neutralization test, we also need a patient serum sample. Okay, the serum is incubated with a virus of interest, but instead of growing it into cells, red blood cells are added to the virus serum mix. So again, if antibodies are present, there will be, the hemagglutination activity will be blocked. If no antibodies are present, the virus will agglutinate or they will bind together. So in this case, in hemagglutination inhibition test, the red blood cells are the indicator. Yan. Enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay. Okay, this is a very popular technique due to the ease and low cost of this test. Okay, the ELISA consists of plastic wells coated with either the antigen, or this the virus, or a protein specific to the antigen of interest. Okay, an unknown sample or serum is allowed to bind to the coated well. Okay, and antibody labeled with an enzyme is applied. Okay, then an indicator is added, then a color change will be observed. Okay, the presence of color indicates the presence of antibodies. Okay, no color means no antibody present. Yan. So there's the agar gel immunodiffusion. So, ayan. This is also referred as the agar gel precipitin test. Involves the diffusion of the virus and antibody through an agar or a gelatin-like substance, which will form a line of identity where the antigen and antibody complexes form. Next, so in light microscopy naman. So viruses, unlike bacteria, okay, as I've said in your first part of your topic, your bacteria is very small to be seen using a light microscope. Okay, so therefore, antibodies labeled with an indicator, most frequently peroxidases or fluorescents, designed to identify the virus of interest, are used. Then this label then enables the visualization of the virus cluster, okay, with the light microscope. In the case of peroxidase or an ultraviolet or an UV or an ultraviolet light microscope, fluorescence naman siya. Okay? Anyway. Yeah. So, from Dr. Natividad's lecture, again, cytology. Okay, so this is a rapid diagnosis of viral infections that produce cytopathic effects. So, a characteristic of CPEs, there is changes in the cell morphology, cell lysis, vacuolization, syncytia formation, okay, presence of inclusion bodies. Okay, another way to identify a virus is through electron microscopy. So since viruses are very much smaller than bacteria, okay, a regular light microscope does not provide sufficient magnification to see the viruses. So the magnification of an electron microscope is 50,000 times more, okay, or 50,000 times magnified, thus providing the ability to see the viral particles. The problem of this method is it lacks sensitivity. So a concentration of approximately 1 million virus particles per milliliter of fluid is required in order to see the virus of interest. However, techniques can be used to improve this, such as immune electron microscopy. So with this technique, the sample is incubated with an antibody against a virus of interest, and an antibody-antigen reaction results in clumps of the virus, which allows for easier visualization. So with the advancement in molecular methodologies, electron microscopy is becoming less widely used. Okay. So virus isolation and detection. So viruses are, again, obligate intracellular parasites. So they depend on the host for their survival. They cannot be grown in a non-living culture media or on plain agar, okay, mga agar plates alone. So they must require living cells to support their replication. So the primary purpose of virus cultivation is to isolate and identify viruses in clinical samples, to do research on viral structure, replication, genetics, and effects on host cells, to prepare viruses for vaccine production. So the methods used for cultivation will be discussed in the following slides. So first, we have animal inoculation. So viruses which are not cultivated in an embryonated egg and tissue culture can be cultivated in laboratory animals such as mice or guinea pig, pwedeng hamster, rabbits, okay, are used. So the selected animal should be healthy and free from any communicable diseases. Okay, so suckling mice are most commonly used, so less than 48 hours old. Okay, these mice are susceptible to Toga virus and Coxsackie virus, which are inoculated by intracerebral or by the intranasal route. So viruses can also be inoculated by intraperitoneal or pwede ring subcutaneous route. So after the inoculation, the viruses multiply in the host and develops the disease. So the animals are observed for the symptoms of disease and death. Then the virus is isolated and purified from the tissue of these animals. So live inoculation was first used on human volunteers for the study of yellow fever virus. Please read the advantages and disadvantages of animal inoculation. Next, embryonated eggs. Okay, so embryonated chick egg was used first for cultivation of viruses by Goodpasture in 1931. So this method was further developed by Burnett and was used for cultivation of viruses in different sites of the embryonated egg. Usually 8 to 11 days old chick eggs are used to culture the viruses. So the viruses are isolated in different sites of the egg, such as the yolk sac, amniotic cavity, the allantoic cavity, chorioallantoic membrane. So many of these viruses cause well-defined and characteristic foci, providing a method for identification, quantification, or also assessing the virus pathogenicity. The embryonated egg is also used for growing high-titer stocks of some viruses in research laboratories for vaccine production. Okay, so again, please read on this, its advantages and disadvantages. Okay. Next method of cultivation is by the use of tissue culture. So the tissue culture was first applied in diagnostic virology by Steinhardt and colleagues in 1913. So they maintained the vaccinia virus by culture in tissues of rabbit cornea. Subsequently, Maitland in 1928 used cut tissues in nutrient media for cultivation of vaccine viruses. Okay, so different types of tissue cultures are used to grow viruses. So tissue culture can be of 3 different types as follows. So we have organ culture, explant culture, and cell culture. Organ culture, this was used earlier for isolation of some viruses, which appears to show affinity for certain tissue organs. So for example, coronavirus, okay, was isolated in the tracheal ring organ culture. So in this method, small bits of the organ are maintained in vitro for 7 days and weeks, preserving their original morphology and function. Nowadays, organ culture is not used. Explant culture naman, it is rarely done So in this method, components of minced tissue are grown as explant and embedded in plasma clots. Third is the cell culture. So this is the process by which the cells are grown under controlled conditions. Cells are grown in vitro on glass or pwede rin sa treated plastic surface in suitable growth medium. At first, growth medium usually balanced salt solution, containing amino acids, protein, sugar, staph serum buffer, okay? And phenol red are taken and host tissue or cell is inoculated. On incubation, the cell divide and spread out on the glass surface to form a confluent monolayer. So cell culture has 3 types. We have primary, secondary, and continuous cell culture. So in primary cell culture, okay. Yeah, so primary cell cultures are normal cells freshly taken from body and cultured. So they are capable of only limited growth in culture. They cannot be maintained in serial culture. Examples are monkey kidney, human embryonic kidney, and chick embryo cell lines. Next, you have the secondary culture or pwede ring diploid cell strain or semi-continuous cell line. So this diploid cell strains are of a single cell type that retains their original diploid chromosome number and karyotype. However, they have specific characteristic and compositions and are usually composed of one basic cell types. They are usually fibroblasts and can be cultured for maximum 50 serial passages before they undergo senescence or die off or undergo significant change in their characteristics. Diploid cells derived from human fibroblasts are useful for isolation of some fastidious viruses. They are also used for production of vaccines. For example, the WA38 human embryonic lung cell stem is used for cultivation of fixed rabies virus. Human fetal diploid cells for isolation of adenovirus and picornaviruses, HSV, CMV, and VCV. Okay, so third cell culture, your continuous cell lines. Okay, continuous or immortal cell lines are cells of a single type which are derived from cancerous tissue and are capable for continuous serial cultivation indefinitely without senescing. Okay, these cells are usually derived from diploid cells or diploid cell lines or from malignant tissues that have altered or irregular number of chromosomes. So they use the HeLa or the human carcinoma of cervix cell line, okay, in continuous cell lines, okay, or HEP2 or Vero. Yung mga ginagamit. So most of the viruses can be isolated using one of these cell lines. Okay. Advantages of tissue culture, okay, it is relatively easy, it has broad spectrum, cheaper, and its sensitivity. Disadvantage, the process requires trained technicians. Yeah. Let's read on this. Next. So, many viruses can be detected and initially identified by observation of the morphological changes in the cultured cells in which they replicate. So, cytopathic effect are distinct observable abnormalities due to viral infection. So, the CPE produced by different types of viruses are characteristic and help in the initial identification of isolates. CPEs can include the loss of adherence to the surface of the container, changes in the cell shape from flat to round. Okay, there is shrinkage of the nucleus, vacuoles in the cytoplasm, fusion of cytoplasmic membranes, and formation of multinucleated syncytia, inclusion bodies, and in the nucleus or cytoplasm, or complete cell lysis. Next, hemadsorption. So it is a process by adsorption of erythrocytes to the surfaces of infected cells, which serves as an indirect measurement of viral protein synthesis. So this property is made use to detect infection with non-cytocidal viruses as well as early stage of cytocidal viruses. Okay, so viruses such as influenza virus, para-influenza virus, mumps, and Toga virus, when they infect cell lines, code for expression of red cell agglutinins, which are expressed on the infected cell membrane during infections. These hemagglutinins bind some erythrocytes to the infected cell surface. Then sometimes, these viruses can be detected by agglutination of erythrocytes in the culture medium. We can also, detect the detection of viral nucleic acid. So this area undergoing the most growth is in the molecular methods and techniques, particularly in relation to virology. So molecular methods do not rely on the presence of live virus, like the virus isolation procedures. So in this method, this method detects a piece of the viral genome, making them more sensitive for detection of the viruses. So traditional molecular techniques are dot plot, southern blot, in situ hybridization technique. Okay, these methods are dependent on the use of specific DNA or RNA probes. They are similar in sensitivities to some of the classical methods, but are more tedious and expensive and are not routinely used in diagnostic laboratory. So the technique that has probably had the greatest impact in the field of virology is this. The polymerase chain reaction. PCR. And the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction, or the RT-PCR, along with the development of better or more standardized method of nucleic acid purification. So the rapid advances and decrease in expense associated with the nucleotide sequencing, the commercial synthesis of oligonucleotides, and the availability of the genetic sequences in public databases have contributed to the increased appeal of these methods. Okay, so the PCR involves the use of two primers designed to identify a target. In the presence of DNA polymerase and other components that are required for DNA amplification, the target sequence of interest, if present, is amplified. The PCR requires a double-stranded DNA, thus it is useful in identifying DNA viruses. The discovery of the RT-PCR, the discovery of the reverse transcriptase, or this enzyme has the an enzyme capable of making DNA copy of the RNA, enabled the ability to expand the PCR to include the RT or the reverse transcription step, which generates the double-stranded target RNA DNA, okay, which is then used in the PCR to identify RNA viruses. Yeah. So this table, okay, this is a table showing you an overview of all the viral diagnostic methods that is used in virology, okay, including its advantages and disadvantages. So please read on this. Okay, in serology, okay, malapit na. So serology detects antibodies, but it takes around 2 weeks or more before you can get a positive results. Okay. detection of rising titers of antibody between acute and convalescent stages of infection. That's what we do in serologic testing. Okay. Yeah. So the classical techniques, we have the complement fixation test, etc. Newer techniques are the following. Okay. Yeah, I think this is my last slide. So for further readings, please read your book. Okay, you have chapter 29 and 30 in your JAWEX, in your textbook 28th edition. Okay. We have, yeah. Any questions?